Hello, everyone, and welcome to June. This June, we are focusing all on the concept of communication. Maybe completely obvious to some, and maybe an afterthought to others. How we communicate in the world and within ourselves. Communication, I think, is surprisingly, but not surprisingly, one of the most important skills and one of the most important tools that we have to help us navigate our love, our life, and our loss. It often starts in the awareness of the way we speak externally, or the way we listen, the way we show up with others. And we often think about this verbal communication and how the things that we're saying to other people, or what we might say, processing what we're going to think about and say. But it's also all the other subtle little details that make a huge impact. It's our non-verbal communication, the things that we can kind of feel when we interact with other people, and those non-verbal signs and cues of how somebody is taking in our message, how they're hearing what we're saying or not, what they're feeling, and what the ideas and insights that are kind of coming to their mind as we are talking or listening or engaging. There's also an element to truth, and it's a big element and part of communication. And although we can't unpack that all in a short little video or touch point here, I invite you to just think about what truth means to you. Truth is quite a loaded topic, and it's very expansive, and it's very personal. And so when I talk about truth and communication, it's this concept of speaking our truth. And to speak our truth, we have to get to know our truth. And this is in all areas of life. So maybe there's one that's kind of surfacing up into your mind more than another right now. And that may be a great place to start. Or maybe there's a few sticky points in life, or somewhere you're really feeling grounded and really rooted in right now. That might be a great place to think about how you're doing it right there, how it's really working for you there. Because whether it's a point of friction, a little edginess somewhere, or it's a point of peace and kind of comfort, there is learning to be had in the way that we are communicating internally and externally. So if we can spend a little bit of time thinking about the external piece this month and exploring how we might get more clarity and expression. So thinking about that nonverbal, thinking about the verbal, maybe it's including written things like texts or emails, or writing a letter to somebody, or just journaling, processing our thoughts, getting them out. Thinking about, what are we really trying to say? What do we want to communicate on? And thinking about the audience or the person that we are communicating to or with, and what kind of language do they use? What kind of language do we feel comfortable with? There's a lot to think about here, and there's tons of great resources out there to start getting curious about. Maybe you've taken some training along the way, whether that's formally in education or in a career path, or maybe you've explored things on your own. And so tapping into some of those skills, maybe even looking on Instagram or Pinterest or Googling, and just thinking about some of the ways you can support yourself in building. I think communication skills, or communication as a whole, is one area that I will always be developing on, and would always encourage people that I'm working with, my family members, my friends, to continue to lean into and develop over time, because we are always communicating. And so the more clear we can get, and the way we can find ourselves, expressing what we're thinking or feeling or needing or able to give, all of these things, the more opportunity for dialogue and understanding and awareness we create. That's really important when we're grieving the loss of somebody. When we are in grief, whatever kind of presentation it's currently in for you, there's a lot that goes unsaid. And sometimes when we leave those things unsaid, other people start to fill in those gaps, right? So maybe people start to assume what we need or how we're feeling or how things are going. And maybe they start to assume on how they should show up or how they're able to interact with us or what's coming next. And so in that gap or that valley created by assumption or the lack of communication, we can often create a distance that maybe we aren't always looking for, or a misunderstanding. This is where communication kind of becomes that bridge or part of our bridge to close that gap. And it doesn't always have to be lengthy. We can communicate very simply sometimes by just giving ourselves a few moments to think about what we really want to say. What is the intention behind what we're trying to say? Intention's a huge part of it, because we might not always have the right words, just like everybody else in our life. We know all the times that people have got it wrong. And I'm sure we've all been in a situation where we've gotten it wrong or felt like we did, and maybe laid awake for half the night processing it, or multiple times thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that, or how did they feel about that, or I could tell. We've all been in that scenario likely. And so intention is another really big part of communication, because if we're clear on our intentions behind the message, it helps us to have that flexibility to get the words wrong sometimes. And even in the way we listen and take in communication from others, the same thing applies. It's kind of like applying grace or patience to communication, listening and giving out and receiving messages. That words can sometimes get lost, right? Even as I'm sharing these ideas with you, I'm trying to find those words, pull in those words of what I'm intending to say and the words that I think will provide that meaning. But we don't always get it right. I don't always get it right. And so if we're clear about our intentions, though, and where they're coming from, that can often be felt through the words or the mediums that we're choosing to communicate with. So thinking about that in that kind of external conversation that's happening. Then there's also the internal one that's really important as well. And this is an area that I have personally experienced where truth is really important, but we're often quick to lie to ourselves. And so as we explore communication this month at a little bit of a deeper touch or a deeper dive, it's that opportunity to think about, if I was listening to your inner voice, or your best friend was listening to the inner voice and the dialogue that's playing inside, what would that feel like? Would you feel proud to share that inner dialogue? Would you feel scared or nervous or embarrassed, ashamed, sad? Because sometimes we're our hardest critics. I know I can be. And sometimes we know the path forward we want to take, or we have the idea that we believe in, and we struggle to find the words to share that with ourselves first, before we can even engage in any dialogue outside of ourselves. So just taking some time to settle into these concepts. I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard them before, but thinking about the way you speak to yourself and knowing that it matters, because you matter. We all matter, regardless of what we're going through in our life or where we're going. In each moment we matter. And so in that mattering, how can we build ourselves up? How can we support that resilience, that curiosity for life and all the possibilities yet to come? Holding both the love and the pain, the grief and the celebration, all of those things are part of us. And so letting that little inner voice, being curious about the messages it's playing inside. Is it helping create the worst case scenarios as a safety mechanism to help you prepare for things? But in the false preparations of a scenario that hasn't happened, it's actually causing more hurt and harm? Or maybe those walls that we're building up as protection are holding you back from something that you'd really like to do. Maybe there's areas that it's really helping create some safe boundaries for you, or acting as that bit of a comfort, that bit of a buffer, while you are working through a ton of emotions and thoughts and feelings, and you are regulating your nervous system again. And so those protections and comforts are helpful. And just having that honest conversation in your mind. Taking some time to play with the ideas of communication externally and how you're communicating on the inside. You can also think about practice. Practice helps, like anything in life. If you are trying to learn how to make music, or build a garden, build a shed, or lead this project in a new way, whatever it is that you're doing, thinking about that. How can you practice so that you can grow in it? How do you learn new things? It's practicing. And so when you're thinking about your communication skills, what can you practice? For me, I want to work on listening better and more clearly, more intently, without thinking of the response or what I'm going to say next. Really hearing what the people in front of me are saying. Being present for their thoughts and ideas. Maybe it's about the way you speak and communicate. Or maybe it's in a certain relationship where you really struggle with communication. And reflecting on why. Maybe there's some obvious things there. Maybe there's some things that require a little bit of soak time to unpack. And maybe there's some new ways that you can approach it. Sometimes I find helping writing down, or even just using words. So maybe you don't want to write the sentences or create this script that feels a little bit restrictive. Sometimes it can be helpful to practice and then just get comfortable saying these things, especially when it comes to talking about your person, your type of loss, where you're at right now, things that you might get asked at the grocery store or by friends or colleagues, things that sort of can catch you off guard. So having that quick statement to think about, what's a sentence that I would feel comfortable saying that kind of honors my truth in a way, but keeps the details out and lets me just keep moving in this scenario? And then maybe you practice and have another option for when you want to share a little bit more and you want to go a little bit deeper. So thinking about the words that feel comfortable for you to use. Knowing what words and language are supportive for you helps you build those communications and craft your message and share your story. Knowing that we are all great storytellers. It's a skill we develop from the time we're born throughout the rest of our lives. And knowing that when we're not speaking or storytelling to other people, we're often creating a story loop in our head about something. Whether we're out for a walk or we are making a meal or working, whatever we're doing, we're often running a story loop in our head. We are great authors. So thinking about when you're authoring the story that's playing in your head, are you creating a story that is hurting you or holding you stuck in some way that hasn't actually unfolded into reality yet? Or are you creating stories of optimism and possibility? Also a story, also not happened yet. Just giving some thought on that. Please reach out and connect and share how communication is applying in your life, or if you have specific questions around it in the community or through email or on social media. Thank you for following along on last month's adventure, everything from the Bereaved Mother's Day Brave Hope Conference to the beautiful full day long grief retreat held in Edmonton, Alberta with Park Memorial, and then off to Chicago for Paulida's IPBC conference, talking about all areas of perinatal loss, and really had the beautiful opportunity to both exhibit and present at that conference, meeting some great new colleagues and resources and people out there working in the space, and everything from new ways that physicians and nurses and clinicians are growing their standard of care, of research that's going on in different areas of stillbirth and aftercare, to meeting incredible bereaved parents out there working in the field of advocacy, everything from hosting retreats to doing and building curriculum for professional settings to help inform those caring for us, to people creating products and mementos and all of these things to support physical pains and ailments and also emotional connections in building those things. And then spending time at Hazel's Heroes Retreat for bereaved moms in the Rocky Mountains, making so many new beautiful connections and hearing stories about these amazing kiddos and their bravery and the love that was there the entire way, how long or short that journey was, and the love that remains and how we continue to build that and foster that. Communication came up in all of these instances and was part of all of these opportunities. Exploring what that meant like for people. Communicating on a new level, finding ways to communicate with our loved ones after they're gone. I send you love as always. I look forward to some of the exciting changes that are coming on the horizon. There was a bit of pause on the community side and working on the construction there, if you will, over all of the live events and things going on in the last couple months. We finished our first cohort of the Bridge Gathering a couple weeks ago, and am just really savoring all of the learnings that came out of that and the beautiful connections, and working on preparing dates and times coming for this fall. So stay tuned. More workshops coming up this summer as well, and happy exploring on your communication journey on the external side and on the internal side, and thinking about ways that you can support yourself in developing that going forward. See you soon.